Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable, and we are very honored to have with us Peter Fong, who is the Chief Revenue Officer at Orbee. Peter, welcome to the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Thank you, Ted. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Peter, I have heard so much of your name, and I'll just tell the audience a little background that I know, and then I'll let you tell us a little bit more about yourself. There was a post on LinkedIn a while back, and you had written something in a comment, and Tom Dahl, our good friend from Subaru, the CEO and president, made a sub comment under what Peter Fong had to say, and he called you out and said, "Peter, how are you?" And I'm like, wow, Tom Dahl doesn't normally do that. This Peter Fong must be pretty amazing for Tom to go ahead and mention him. So that's when you and I struck up a conversation, and you just have an amazing background.
Well, thanks, Ted. I think the reason he probably responded is the commonality is we're both Villanova grads. So a lot of people may not know that because Tom graduated probably a few years before I did, but he's a longtime Villanova Wildcat, and I am too. In fact, I graduated from Villanova twice. I have a mechanical engineering and an MBA from Villanova, and I have a daughter that just graduated from there this past May. So it's a commonality, and that's certainly something that Tom and I have in common, and not the least of which is the the former Cherry Hill headquarters, and now Camden, New Jersey headquarters is about 15 minutes from my house.
Wow. And so we're both I guess New Jersey based, if
Absolutely.
you could say. But your background in the business, the more I did a little research, Fred Beans mentioned your name, and I spoke to some good friends at Team Velocity. I mentioned to you Justin Bird a little while back. Tell us a little bit about who Peter Fong is.
Well, I'm a longtime automotive guy. As you know, when you're around that long in the business, I think a lot of people tend to know who you are. But I really do owe my early days in the industry to Ford Motor Company. I was hired out of business school in 1994 to join Ford Motor Company. I was brought into what they called at the time the Marketing Leadership Program, and it was a program designed by a gentleman by the name of Bob Ruey, who wanted to build a bench of marketers within the organization that could potentially take high-level positions at Ford. And because Ford was always known of having great engineers, great, bean counters, if you will, and finance people and product people, but, never known for marketing. And one of the inaugural people in that program is Mark Fields, who eventually became the CEO of Ford Motor Company. And now I think is the acting CEO of Hertz in the restructuring right now. So the program must have worked because Mark became the CEO, and I was one of the many fortunate members of that program to enjoy 14 years at Ford Motor Company and probably 10 or 12 different jobs in that 14-year period. So I think it's easy to say that over a 14-year period, when you have that many jobs, you'll learn a lot about the business. But I did start in the business calling on dealers as a parts and service zone manager. So fixed operations is near and dear to my heart. That's where I started. Called on, service managers and parts managers. That was my first job at Ford Motor Company, even though I was kind of a higher level hire at the age of 32 after flying helicopters for 8.5 years in the Navy. So I was kind of a different hire at the time. And after 14 years at Ford, I had the opportunity to go over to Chrysler during the pre and post bankruptcy days. That's where I met Justin Bird. He was the first guy I met when Chrysler opened up their arms to welcome me in 2008. And then, as you know, back then, when the bankruptcy happened, it was a pretty tumultuous period of time. But when you think back of where Chrysler now, FCA, now Stellantis has come, it's just been remarkable.
And you mentioned some names, you mentioned Bob Ruey. Bob Ruey really helped determine so much of what happened at Ford and their dealers, for a long period of time. The selection of people and the processes and things that were put in place. So that's really a very, very great honor to have started there.
The other gentleman who's also a Villanova grad was a guy named Jim O'Connor, who was kind of a mentor to me at Ford for many years. And he is also, as I mentioned, a Villanova grad. So for many years, he was the lead recruiter at Villanova. And when I came on board and he took me under his wing. I became the lead recruiter, hiring any number of people that I could name today that were also Villanova. Andrew Frick, the head of sales for Ford today, is a Villanova grad.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So with all this talk about Villanova and March Magic and March Madness, is there something about March Madness that excites you personally? Because you and I have had some discussions about that.
Well, Ted, that's an easy one. In 1985, Villanova beat Georgetown in the championships, and that probably goes down in the history of NCAA basketball as the perfect Cinderella story, because Villanova was a number 8 seed. I don't think they were even ranked in the AP poll, and they came back and won the championship. So it just goes to show that it doesn't matter where you ranked. If you put a lot of hard work, effort, and grit into it, you can go to the very top, and that applies in every business. And March Madness is great because, even today, the last time I looked, the top 3 teams, Auburn, I think it's Auburn, Gonzaga, and Purdue, none of them have a perfect record. So it just goes to show that it doesn't matter, what kind of talent you have. March Madness allows the hardest working team with the strongest focus to come back and win the whole tournament if that's what they want to do. And I have a son that actually went to UVA in 2019. They won the championship. My daughter was at Villanova in 2018 when they won the championship. And I got one last son that hopefully will experience a national championship like their old man and his older brother and sister did. And he's at UVA, so he's got a shot.
What you just said, though, about March Madness really speaks to the resoluteness of our dealers in the automotive industry. Absolutely. As well. Because look at all the adversity, quote unquote, that we have been faced with in the last 2 years. And look how determined and how the retail body has come back and been proactive and just figured out, even in these tumultuous times, how to make it all work.
Absolutely. Especially during the pandemic. I think it just goes to show, there were a few months there in some states where they couldn't even sell a car in person. And now, looking at the profits from 2021, it was some doubled the profits that from the history of their businesses. They had double the profits that they had ever gained. So it's pretty amazing.
So amazing time. Now, what are your expectations? Because here we are in early March. We got Fixed Ops Roundtable going on. We got the National Auto Dealers Association show going on. What are your expectations? For right now, what's going to happen in the next few months and beyond for our dealers?
Well, I don't think there's any question that NADA is very excited to have the in-person show in March. Yeah. As you mentioned before the show, you all were fortunate to have a really great presence on your show, Fixed Ops Roundtable, and NADA. It was basically experiencing their first time ever for a virtual show, something they've done in person for years. I was at the 100th year anniversary in New Orleans when we celebrated that, and that was amazing. But I will tell you that this show will probably outdo even the 100th year anniversary, because I think there's a lot of pent up demand for people to want to do business in person. They've got that amazing Allegiant Stadium where, the Las Vegas professional football team plays now. And they've got Train coming that night. And Scott Doobie, who's the chair of that, auto show committee, I think he was determined to work with Mike Stanton and Steve Pitt and the rest of the auto show team to put the best, trade show in the auto industry ever, because I think it's long overdue. And I think everybody, dealers and vendors alike, are ready for a great show.
And you've got some background at NADA as well, because I know a lot of folks who know you from NADA and the good work that you've done in helping with their educational programs, with the NADA Dealer Academy, which is the foremost of its kind. Nothing quite like it at all anywhere in the industry.
The best in the industry, the best instructors and the 20 group moderators. There's 24 or 5 of them, they're the best at what they do. So I'm very excited for NADA to have the show in March, and it'll butt up against your Fixed Ops Roundtable around the same time. So it's going to be great. It's going to be a great week.
It's a great week for everybody. Now here you are, you're the Chief Revenue Officer at Orbee. I want to ask you about that because, Peter, there's been a lot of chatter going on, not only at this event, but throughout the industry about digital retailing. We've heard it now for the last couple of years. What are your thoughts about digital retailing?
Well, digital retailing, it's kind of funny when you think about it. Digital retailing has been going on forever outside this industry. When you think about the Amazons and Best Buys and even, what Walmart is doing, And now, obviously, with the Carvanas and Vrooms of the world, that's what got the attention of the auto industry, coupled with the pandemic. So obviously, everybody's like, well, if a company like Carvana can sell a car online from the very beginning to the end and do it completely without, kicking tires and obviously going to a showroom, it got a lot of people's attention. And the pandemic certainly, accelerated that. Everybody jumped on the bandwagon, and OEMs alike would either partner with a digital retailing tool to roll out something. But at the end of the day, depending on who you ask, it ranges from anywhere from maybe on the high side, 6 or 7% to as low as 3 or 4% of the people that are actually going through the full platform and buying a car, like somebody does on Amazon, or I'm sorry, like Vroom or Carvana or Shift. And the reason for that, I think there's many reasons for that. And one of which is the fact that we have such a huge distribution network out there that obviously are made up of owners of car dealerships and groups that are the best at what they do. And they're able to pivot, and they're able to keep their customers loyal. And really, digital retailing is something that I believe should be more. It should really be called customer. It's a focus on the customer and understanding the customer, and it's creating the best customer experience you can for your loyal customers. And really, that's something that our dealerships know how to do. Now they've had to learn how to pivot, because obviously, when there's all kinds of tools out there that can allegedly show you how to sell a car, all the way from the beginning to the end and picking up the vehicle, we all know that there's state laws that prevent you from even doing an e-signature, so that you can do that you have to actually do wet signatures in order to buy a car. But at the end of the day, it's really about creating the best consumer experience for your customers and making sure they're brand loyal to you. Digital retailing is something it's not new. It's just a buzzword that, the auto industry has taken to a new level because, one, the news, when the three big companies were acquired recently, whether it was, CDK and Roadster, shortly followed by Reynolds and Reynolds of Goobagoo, and then even JD Power bought Darwin. And frankly, when you think about what happened with all those acquisitions, it was nothing more than a data play to make sure that the information you have about customers, whether you're with, CDK or Roadster, you're able to combine that data together. You'll know more about that customer, and you can create that frictionless experience and that better experience. And there's no different than what Reynolds and Reynolds will do with Goobagoo, what JD Power will do with Darwin, and frankly, the recent announcement just the other day with Cars.com and AccuTrade that's going to bring, cars into the whole wholesale remarketing business. And it's all about data that's going to allow more transparency so that customers of both Cars and AccuTrade will have a better experience. So digital retailing is kind of a misnomer. It's really, customer experience and creating the best customer experience you can for your customers. That's really what it should be called.
And Peter, I've got to ask you this finally, especially with what you're doing there at Orbee. How can marketing data and automation be used to better optimize capacity in the, what we've called historically the back end of the dealership, the service department?
Well, I mean, when it comes to data, this is what I think dealerships need to all understand. That's really the most important data that you have, especially from your own websites. And it's no different than personal relationships. So, Ted, if you run across a friend of yours that remembers your name every time you see them, that person's likely to be a friend for a long time. Yeah. And even better, if you run into a buddy of yours that knows the kind of beer you like to drink, okay, and remembers your birthday every time you see him, he's likely to be a long-term friend and somebody that you'll keep in touch with for a long time. So the way, brands relate with their customers, and it's no different than dealers with their customers, they need to understand those that are interested in their brand. And dealerships have been around for years, multi-generations. And this past year, I went to an NADA Academy graduation where the fourth generation was graduating. Charlie Falk Jr., Charlie Falk III, Adam Falk, and the youngest son, Charlie III, is 4 generations in the car business. And that's the value of a business in the dealership world, because, there's lots of them that have been around a long time. But to understand the data, and that data is what we call first party data that dealerships own from their websites, you'll better understand what's going on with what these people are doing in your websites. And the more and more you know about the customers on your website, the better you can engage with them. So that's what's really important about marketing data. Is I don't think enough dealerships understand that shopper profiles. You can clearly create segments, nothing more than a bucket of what a person does in your website. Like if Ted Ings likes, electric vehicles, you're going to be able to track how many times you're going on a dealership website and you're looking at a Mustang Mach-E or an F-150 Lightning. And with those buckets of information, another a fancier name, the segments, you can market to them directly and provide them a relevant message so that you can continue to do business with that dealership. So data is going to be very important. And the best thing about data is that there's technology that allows you to market them automatically, where you don't need a human to send an email blast out. You can do that automatically. Because as you know, with digital retailing and the way business is changing, Ted, let's face it, most dealers are going to adopt some form of order to delivery. They're selling vehicles before they even show up in the showroom. The OEMs have recognized that they don't need to have all this brick and mortar, and not so much brick and mortar. They don't need all this inventory to sell a car. And the pandemic and the chip shortage has proven that. And on the fixed op side, there's many ways that you can actually use data to market to the fixed op customer. And I'll give you one example, Ted. Everybody I talk to is saying their capacity is maxed out, even to get an oil change done for somebody. Okay. So you're able to capture on a dealership's website how many times a customer is going in to try to schedule, an oil change. And when you set up your website, something fundamental is that you need to stage your website just like you stage a house to sell. Think about when you stage a house. I've got a neighbor across the street, beautiful old home that's been around since the 1800s. And he's had it on the market for the longest time. And he never staged it. He thought somebody would just come around and buy the house empty, even though, it was a beautiful home. Well, guess what? You need to stage the home so that people can envision themselves being in it. And one of the things my wife actually recommended to him was like, you need to set up these extra bedrooms that you have, because there's like 10 rooms in this 4,000, 5,000 square foot house. And guess what? Everybody's working from home. So she said, why don't you stage a couple of home offices, maybe a nursery with an expecting mother that has a child coming along, and create what you can obviously envision somebody seeing themselves doing in that house. And it's no different than a website. You need to stage your website so somebody can see themselves, obviously, potentially signing up for service on another day when they're not able to make it. You can automate marketing messages to them so that maybe they come on a day when it's less crowded for the dealership, and you can offer them a discount on a lube oil change. My point is that there's so much data that a dealership can collect on a dealership's website, and you can bucket those activities. You can personalize the message so that that person you're doing business with is somebody that's going to want to do business with you long term. That's the simplest way that I can put it.
And Peter, I know that you're doing this right now at Orbee. If our audience, our dealers, our managers, our fixed ops directors want to reach out to you and learn more, or just connect with you, Peter, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Well, you've got my cell phone right there on the bottom ticking along. So you can certainly call me. My email address is there, and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can DM me on LinkedIn. So it's easy to get hold of me. My cell phone is open to the world. I respond to emails and texts all day long, and it's easy. We'll also be at NADA. You can stop by the booth. But I think that if you capture my cell phone that's right there, or even go on LinkedIn, my number is listed there. It's easy to get hold of me. That's the easy thing to do, and be happy to help anybody out that wants to learn more about it.
Peter, great honor. We have to have you back because there's so much we could talk about together. Again, thank you so much for being here today. Everybody, Peter Fong, the Chief Revenue Officer at Orbee, here today at the Fixed Ops Roundtable.
Pleasure to be here, Ted.